Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Scott. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Scott, I'm excited for this conversation. I was just saying we've had a lot of episodes and I don't think we've really touched on this subject. But before we dive into it, let's get to know you, Scott. A little bit about your background, what you love about content and marketing. It'd be great for us to get to know you.
Yeah. Well, I like to tell people I'm a native New Yorker and I live in California. So I'm kind of rough and tumble on the inside, lots of elbows. But on the outside, I'm very mellow and have kind of hopefully this comes through a calm presence. But I'm in California now. And so I currently work at a place called Clary. And I head up digital self-service, digital success. And I use those terms interchangeably because self-serve, which is what we use internally, tends to be more support and kind of the other things we do, which is proactively helping customers proactively helping customers learn our products, help them learn their craft, help them accelerate their careers. So the team manages in-product resources, which is content inside the product, and manages community, knowledge base, university. And again, those are most of them are kind of like inbound interactions, but we also do outbound, which is email, etc.
I love it. Well, today we're going to talk about user-generated content. And this is one of the coolest forms of content, to be completely honest. And Scott, you have been doing this for quite a while. How did you get onto user-generated content? Where did it start for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, well, first of all, I've always enjoyed writing myself. So I've been in a lot of writing groups growing up, so I can see what other people bring to the table. I think the big thing is in the 90s, I was managing Borders.com, and the initial charter was to create an e-commerce site, but we also leaned into community a lot. So we created an online community, and Borders had like 200 stores. So for those folks who don't know Borders, big bookstore, books, music, video.
Fantastic place to go. Big fan.
Exactly. So each of the 200 stores had their own website. So you can imagine now we had like 201 or so. And the people who performed readings in the bookstores, the people who performed concerts in the bookstores, we actually broadcast that live on the internet. And so that was pretty unique, and it took a lot of managing. But I think the key thing there was all of a sudden, all these artists were providing content to us. And then the community was the raving fans, and they were responding. And then at the same time, Amazon book reviews took off, right? So we had all these customers writing reviews of books and things like that. So we would just gently nudge them into answering other questions. Like if you are reviewing a book and you're an expert on the topic, well, maybe you could share that with other folks. So that was kind of the seeds of all this. I mean, I've always been a big believer in, walk in the other person's shoes, understand them. Anyway, so that's how it started.
I love it. So when we talk about user-generated content, I think that sometimes it feels pretty natural to answer this question, but I'm curious to get your response. Why? Why is it different from other content, and why is it important for a business to lean into this, regardless of their audience, B2C, B2B, whatever it may be? Why is user-generated content different and potentially better than other forms of content?
Yeah. Well, basically, the person who is trying to get using business terms, jobs to be done, the person who's doing the job, the person who's trying to accomplish something, they've learned something in that process. And so they can share it. They're closer than you'll ever be to, whether they're in a certain industry, whether they're dealing with a certain feature in your product, things like that, right? So I think the first thing is like the person who's the customer, the prospect, the partner, again, it doesn't have to be customers all the time. They're the ones who are closest to whatever question you want to really answer. The second thing is how they talk about their problems. Now I sound like a therapist, how they talk about the problem they're trying to solve or the job they're trying to do, how they use their product. There's a certain tone, a certain voice, right? And so that's going to resonate with other folks. Like I work at Clary, I use Clary a lot. Maybe I'm too much of a Clary nerd, right? But there's going to be people who are new to Clary, right? And they might not resonate with me because I'm in California and I might be in a different industry, right? So there's this thing about tone and voice. And I always tell this story of when I was at Intuit and it was smaller and I was closer with, the employees were really close to the founder, Scott Cook. I would go into his office with all my fancy MBA slides and all this stuff. And he basically would throw it in the trash. He wouldn't throw it in the trash, but he'd throw it aside and he would say, tell me what the customers are saying. Tell me in their own voice, right? And now today we can even scale that with, we have a product called Copilot, which is like, similar to what Gong does, et cetera. So, right. So everybody on the team, we're not just talking about like what's on the website. You can like tap into how people talk about your products. So I think the first thing is, the relatability that others have. 2 is the tone and voice. 3 is the scalability, right? So, I talked a while back about, again, that Intuit when everybody was wanting me to create, I was managing the e-commerce site and everybody wanted me to create content. I was like, well, will you pay for headcount for a writer? And the answer was no. So basically I said, okay, how do I solve this? And that's when I really reached out to folks and had them, create content and user-generated content in the community. Another good story is at Marketo, everybody was asking for videos of how to use the product. So one of the things we did was we had something called the Marketing Nation, which was a big community. We created the Nation Talks. And basically, I would ask customers to create videos about how they use the product. Now, the interesting thing here is when I just asked them to create videos, that was too vague for them. Like they're like, what do you mean? Like, where do we start? So I built a syllabus of the videos we needed, and customers were creating them. So if you Google, Marketing Nation Talks, you'll see these customers who created these short videos on how to use the product or a little bit about their industry. Now, you didn't give me any guidelines today for what I should wear to this, but I forgot to do that for the first videos, and so some guy did a video in his bathrobe. So there's learning along the way. Anyway, so those are some of the reasons of why you should do it.
I love it. So everyone listening, hopefully you're sold on user-generated content and the value. I guess the next step, and you've used some of these analogies and these stories to kind of explain some of this, but really, where do I start? How do I go out there and do I incentivize people? Am I just looking for the content? Am I sending it to them? How do I start to wrap my head around building a program that can actually produce and scale user-generated content?
A great question. So I think the first thing is in talking to your customers, and I find that a lot of marketers don't talk to customers. So if there's one takeaway is talk to the customers. And so when you're talking to the customers, and they could be your advocates, they could be your loyal customers, but they don't have to be. When you hear how they're using your product, when you hear their stories, and something really resonates or clicks with you, whether it's the person you're dealing with or the story, just ask them, right? I mean, especially today, I think when I first started this stuff, there were people who were a bit reticent about doing a video, doing a podcast, or talking in public or online, right? Today, you go to LinkedIn and everybody's sharing their story. Like somebody shared a sonogram the other day on LinkedIn. I was like, whoa, okay, we've come far. There's no problem with that, for me at least. So I think the thing is that to be a good marketer, whether you're a content marketer or not, you got to talk to the customers, right? You got to sit down with them and really understand like how they use their product, how they want to be better with their craft, how they want to accelerate their career. And in those conversations, you can say to them, we would love you to, generate a video or something like that. We're not talking about like marketing, creating a customer story, right?
Yeah.
Which then goes in some like virtual one pager and gets distributed. We're talking about you are basically you're creating the content, right? And I'll give you a really great example is So we recently launched a community. We've had a university. And something I did in the past was have customers create courses create the courses for the university. So I reached out to just 10 customers who I interact with all the time on Zoom. And I said to them, would you be willing to create a course? You have expertise, and I gave some examples of Oscar. You have an expertise in this. Daphne, you're really good in terms of running cross-functional teams. Would you be willing to create a course? And I talked a little bit about what's required for that, and I can go into more detail. And 3 out of 10 said yes, right off the bat, right? First conversation. So 30%, that's pretty good, right? You know, if you have, thousands of customers and you can keep that percentage or even cut it in half, then, but anyway, so I think that's how you get started in all this. And a good community practitioner will know, like, when you start out, you want to you as a community leader, because a lot of user-generated content is for community, you need to have these one-on-one conversations in Zoom or whatever. Like, that's one of the secrets in all this is you as the leader of a community, or you as the head of a user-generated content program, you need to build a rapport. Ben, I'm building a rapport with you today, and who knows, I might say to you, Ben, you work in content marketing, I have this syllabus of questions I need to answer. Do any of these resonate with you?
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So you're sold on doing it. You're reaching out. You're talking to your customers. You're getting user-generated content. I guess the final part of that is, once you have the content, how do you capitalize on it? How do you get value out of it? Where are you using it? What can we do with that content to actually get real business value from it?
Yeah. So a few things. So one is, where do I use it? I can use it in the community. I could use it in the university. I know I talk a lot about Intuit. I do believe that everybody has one company that really impacts their careers. So Intuit, we actually, Ben, do you ever do your own taxes, by the way? This random question.
Not anymore. Okay. Not anymore.
So when you do your own taxes on TurboTax, there's actually user-generated content in the product. So you can use it in the product as well. Like, if you have a question around W-2 versus 1099 and you're in the widget business, right? You can post a question and it goes right to the community. So you can use it in multiple platforms. I built a whole online campus in my previous job where there was templates, and all the templates, for example, I guess it's like a resource center, all of them were user generated. So that's kind of a broad answer for where you could use it. In terms of the value, I think the first thing is the value to the customer value. So asking the customer if this is going to help them, with their careers, with, understand a product. Maybe it's your product. In my previous job, it was multiple products, etc. And then, if you really want to, then obviously you're a business and you have to make money. So then you can look at inferred impact or attribution on ARR, retention, and churn. And all these companies that I've worked at, the people who are generating the content, they're more engaged. They're creating content, have had higher ARRs, less churn rates, higher retention. Now, again, a lot of it's inferred, right? But definitely the numbers are there. They were there at HubSpot. They were there at Marketo, Intuit, etc.
So one final question, and these podcasts go by quick, and I'm really excited about this episode and everything we've learned. But you've used the term community a lot. How do businesses, and how should businesses start to think about building communities and the importance and the investment and kind of what that looks like in general? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So first, just a caveat. So again, user-generated content doesn't have to be on a community.
Yeah.
But people on a community are obviously inclined to express themselves. In terms of starting out, I think a lot of it is similar to what I said earlier about, when you're interacting with users, and maybe you start with your high value customers, ask them how they learn about your product. Ask them how they, improve their craft. Ask them about their careers, and then ask them if they'd be willing to share that. And start small, right? Maybe you you can even start with like a Zoom call with a few people and then say, can we transfer this to a community over time? I think also when you create community, a lot of times it's created in a vacuum. So, I'm a big company enterprise kind of guy, I guess. So I really think about how it supports the larger picture of the company, the true north of the company, right? So we're trying to teach people how we call it run revenue, but how to treat revenue as a business process, right? So there's a lot of people who are struggling with that. There's a lot of people who are successful at that, right? So when you're getting these small groups of people together, ask them to share their stories, and you're just creating the house and inviting people to it. And then hopefully they'll mingle with each other, whether it's real time or asynchronous.
I love that. Well, I have really loved this conversation. It's changed how I've thought about user-generated content and just how important it is. Scott, if anyone wants to continue the conversation and reach out and find you online, where can they go to reach out?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always love talking about this. And I do think companies, they either don't put enough energy into this or they fear it, right? They fear that somebody is going to write an article or create a course that's inaccurate, right? And what is inaccurate? I mean, people are coming up with different ways to use your product. And I can count on one hand with 3 fingers the amount of times in 20 years I've had a problem. So again, I'm a numbers guy. So that's pretty good. So don't fear it, right? So you can always find me on LinkedIn. And that's kind of I only bet on one social media platform. I always have been that way. It's always been LinkedIn since Reid Hoffman created it. So you can always reach out to me there. I'm pretty good. Maybe, again, being a baseball guy and a numbers guy, I guess you don't really bat this in baseball, but probably batting about a 700 in terms of getting back to people. It's weird, some of the things you do get asked on LinkedIn. But putting that aside, just feel free to reach me on LinkedIn, and totally passionate about this topic. So if you want to discuss user-generated content, baseball, New York, or anything, let me know.
Love it. And Scott, we'll link to your profile in the comments section and the notes below so that everyone can get access to it. Again, thank you so much for your insights and time today.
Ben, first of all, it's been great to meet you because we didn't know each other beforehand. And 2 is I really love what you're doing, especially that you keep these short and sweet.
I love it. Thanks again, Scott.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.